realm of silence and non-verbal communion to the field of verbal communication and conversation. We have come together for an intensive self-education camp. And I'm glad to see so many of you joining this adventure. I say I am glad because the circumstances in which the human race has plunged itself since the last few weeks is really a very explosive and dangerous situation. It seems as if the whole world is on the brink of a third world war. And there must be sadness and anxiety in your hearts as it is in mine, because we as religious inquirers look upon all the human beings inhabiting the earth as members of one human family. So it could have been possible for any of you to feel so frustrated and despondent that the heaviness of despondency and frustration could have kept you away from this tiny self-education camp that we are going to conduct for the next 10 days in a far-off corner of California. There must be some faith in the hearts of those who have brought themselves here for joining the adventure. Faith in life. Faith in the totality of life that has been expressing itself through untold centuries in an innumerable variety of manifestations. Sometimes the manifestation of global life brings the breeze of joyous peace. Sometimes it brings the spontaneous outburst of compassionate love. sometimes the waves in the psychological structure of the human race manifest in the turbulence of confusion, chaos, and anarchy. The human history has passed through many such phases, and it shall pass through the heavy one that is round the corner, and man shall overcome. It is also humility which might have brought you here, because self-education requires a humility to learn. Learn through living. Education is not a cerebral movement exclusively. It is not entirely a cerebral, intellectual, or an emotional exercise. Education is learning, understanding, implementing the understanding right down to the sensual level, and growing with one's totality into a new dimension. Attending meetings and conferences requires a receptivity and the capacity to listen. But one is engaged there most often in the activity of knowing with the help of brain. As a listener, one exercises the brain, receives the words, interprets them according to the terms of reference that one has acquired beforehand, puts the new pieces of information that one has gathered into the storehouse of memory, organizes it with the previous knowledge and experience, and one goes away from the meeting. The intellectual exercises does refresh the intellect. It entertains the mind, stimulates the emotions, intoxicates the person for a few hours or a few days, or at best for a few weeks if the person has a depth to his being. So knowing is a cerebral exercise, and the storehouse of memory gets enriched by the acquired pieces of knowledge. And the sense of security is enhanced by the acquisition of knowledge. But knowing surely is not synonymous with understanding. You may know about all the philosophies in the world, and it is possible that you might understand very little of it. Knowing is an acquisitive activity, whereas understanding involves not only the cerebral organ, or the psychological structure, but the whole being. You know, in order to feel secure with that knowledge, but unless there is a yearning to live, to learn, to grow, the whole being is not involved in the act of listening. Listening leads to learning when the whole being is committed to that act, involved in that action. So those who wish to understand, those who are not satisfied only with acquiring and storing the pieces of knowledge and sew them together with the threads of ideologies, theories, and philosophies, but wish to understand, they join conferences, seminars, they conduct a participative intellectual inquiry, enter into exchanges, conduct discussions. But when the understanding takes place, one requires an opportunity to let the senses and the mind live its understanding. So in a camp, not a conference, a weekend conference or a 2-day seminar, but a camp for a few days together, or if possible, weeks together. Inquirers can come and give themselves an opportunity of living what they have understood. Knowing, understanding, and living of the understanding. The three together equip the human apparatus for the total change to take place, for a transformation to take place. So education is for equipping the whole human apparatus, the body, the mind, the speech, the brain, everything together. It's an involvement of the whole being. So I do hope none of us has come here with the view of spending a few days in rest and relaxation, or spending a few days in vacation with good people around. I hope none has come with the desire of entertainment or intellectual stimulation, but that every one of us is inspired with the urge to discover what is religion and religious living. It is only when the foundation of that urge is there that the listening, participating, and experimenting will become possible. Shall I give you this? It's okay? So I hope that we will not fritter away our energies for the next 9 days by getting excited sensually. I hope you understand what I am hinting at. The beauty, the solitude, the peace, and the company of like-minded people has its own excitement. And one likes to verbalize 10 times a day how beautiful it is and how nice it feels here, how nice it feels to be here with like-minded people. That is to say, one remains engaged with the emotions and the emotional reaction. One does not fritter away one's energy, as the 10 days are going to be rather precious for each one of us. One doesn't get absorbed. To be with beauty and yet not get lost in it, to be absorbed by it. To enjoy the eloquence of the presence of like-minded people and yet not get so absorbed by it that the excitement doesn't allow you to relax. So we shan't get excited, we shan't get absorbed, shan't get lost. As we shall require all the alertness and attentiveness at our disposal. Now, this afternoon, shall we look at the word self-education? I sit here to monitor the inquiry. Or perhaps as a captain of a team when you play a game. I hope you understand the difference between a captain of a team that goes out to play, a monitor in a class, and a master, a teacher, or a guru. You and I together shall learn from the same master, that is the life. The life, the relationships around us and within us. So life will be the teacher outside, and understanding within us will be the inner teacher. If a person can live one's own understanding, 99% problems of one's life shall be solved very easily. If one has the humility to live what the voice of intelligence says from within, what the understanding, the voice of understanding, the voice of silence from within whispers unto us, if one has the humility to be a disciple of one's own understanding, one shall see that life changes, growth takes place, and relationships do not appear to be ordeals or a battlefield. So, we shall be educating ourselves by living the inner understanding that takes place without being defensive. You might have noticed how we are defensive and apologetic before our own intelligence. The intelligence points out when one tells a lie, when one indulges in a falsehood, when one indulges in idleness, laziness, when one postpones actions and decisions. The intelligence, the understanding points out from within that what is being done is incorrect, it's undesirable. And then we defend, we plead. So there is the intelligence within, and one pleads one's case, the case of idleness, postponement, procrastination, case of falsehoods and lies that we indulge in very easily, very casually, and we betray our own understanding. And if I betray my own understanding, who on the earth is going to save me? If I have the cheek to deceive myself by imagining that I don't understand, while understanding is there, but it is very unpleasant for me to act upon my understanding, who is going to lift me up and take me away from this vicious game of self-deception? So, education takes place when we have the humility to listen to the voice of understanding that takes place in our heart and act upon it instantaneously, immediately, without defending, without protecting, without arguing, without trying to dodge, without trying to escape from it. That's why the word self-education has been used as an adjective to the camp, self-education camp. Why is it called intensive self-education? We cannot be here together for months, can we? Those who are doing jobs, have responsibilities of families, have come from lands far off. There is a time limit. Even to come away for 9 or 10 days is quite a luxury. That's why we have to enter into intensive self-education. That is to say, without getting distracted, without diverting any of our energies, we focus all the energies in listening, learning, understanding, and living up, no, not up to, living the understanding. If I say up to, it will become an authority. And if I convert my understanding into an authority, I'll try to impose it upon you. And the whole will be back into the trap. So live the understanding as it takes place. We'll be having one talk a day and a discussion session. We'll be meeting here together to sit in silence, and the last point in this welcome talk, as it was supposed to be, Last point is, why are we embarking upon this adventure of self-education? This embarking upon the adventure of educating the bodies, the minds, the speech becomes necessary because religion is a way of living. We are not referring here by the word religion to organized sects and institutions. The word religion does not imply for me any institutionalization of truths and theories and presumptions. It is a way of living. It is a way of living in the known with the awareness of the unknown. We'll be living as we have to with the known, in and through the known. The movement of the known is something that cannot be avoided. We ourselves are the cells of such movement. The past moves through us. The past expresses itself through us. So it's living in and through the known, which is surrounded by the unknown. It is living and moving through time that we have created for our convenience with the awareness of the time-free reality. It is dealing with particulars, particular individuals, particular situations, particular challenges, focusing all energy upon dealing with those particulars with the awareness that the particulars are organically related to the total. Mind you, a particular is not a fragment. Particular is not a piece of totality cut away from it, from its source, from the wholeness. It's not a fragment. Particular is an expression of the total. So, being limited by the form, living in a human body, expressing ourselves through the conditioned mind, limited by the past, limited by the means of communication that we have created and developed. We'll have to move through these. We'll have to move through the limitations. And the first and the fundamental limitation is the senses, the sense organs, cannot take in the totality of anything that they get into touch with. The ears cannot take in the total sound. The eyes cannot take in the total unit of observation or perception. The mind cannot take in the totality in one sweep. It takes in one, and then the other, and then the other, and keeps them together with the help of an idea of sequence and continuity. So, we cannot avoid dealing with particulars. We cannot see the totality. The senses, the mind, the brain cannot take in the totality in one sweep, as it were. So, living and moving in and through the particulars, there can be an awareness of the total, of the whole. The awareness of the wholeness and the grip on the particular is a way of religious living. So religion is a way of living in which the senses, the body, the whole of it, the beautiful wealth inside the body is involved. The manipulation of sounds, which is speech, is involved. This mysterious process of breathing is involved. Looking, listening, this is involved. This is living. So, religion is a way of living in which your totality is involved. Every moment, in every relationship. One does not live through a fragment of one's being. One does not live partially. It's a way of living with your totality, dealing with the particulars that the senses and the mind bring in with the awareness of the whole life. We'll go into all these details because the theme for this camp is going to be meditation and religion. But I just wanted to clarify in the very beginning that religion for me does not mean any institutionalized truth and theory. Religion implies discovering if man can set himself free of violence. We haven't changed. We are violent, individually and collectively. The expression of violence changes. The expression has been changing through centuries. Instead of bows and arrows, there may be swords. In place of swords, there may be guns. In place of guns, there might be nuclear weapons. In place of physical exploitation, there could be psychological, intellectual exploitation, individually, and economic exploitation collectively, and political exploitation, and so on. The whole human race is now in the grip of a challenge. It has created for itself a world context where it cannot escape one another. Person living in Iran, or Turkey, or Saudi Arabia, or Japan or Australia is our neighbor sitting here in California, and we are their neighbors. We cannot escape one another. We have created a structure of economic and political life, a structure of trade and commerce and business, where life fabric is woven together. So the way out is finding out, discovering if there is a dimension where man can be free of this violence in him, where violence begins with assertion, develops with aggression, flowers into exploitation and ends in wars and killings. We may be a handful here, engaging ourselves in such serious discoveries and serious enquiries. But such inquirers, explorers, have been the salt of the earth through centuries, and such groups scattered all over the world may be doing exactly the same what we are doing in this corner. They shall be the salt. Abhayam karotu antariksham abhayam dyava prithvi ubhe ime abhayam पश्चात अभयं पुरस्तात् उत्तरात् अधरात् अभयं नः अस्तु अभयं मित्रात् अभयं अमित्रात् अभयं ज्ञातात् अभयं पुरोयः सर्वे मम आशा अभयं भवन्तु सर्वे मम आशा अभयं भवन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. The meaning is, may the entire space be free of fear. May the earth be free from all manner of fear. May there be no fear from the west, and may there be no fear from the east. May not the south frighten the north, and the north intimidates the south. May there be no fear of the past, and may the future be free of fear. May there be no fear from those who look upon themselves as our foes, and may there be no fear from our friends. May the whole human race unite in fearless friendship. Yesterday, that religion is a way of living. It is not related in any manner to any acquisitive activity. We had seen yesterday that knowing is an acquisitive cerebral activity. As the hand reaches out towards a visible object, the brain reaches out towards words gathers them, measures them, and after comparison and evaluation, either it accepts them or rejects. So the cerebral activity of reaching out towards words, receiving and interpreting them is as much an acquisitive activity as you reach out towards objects through your sense organs. You store them in your houses. You measure and evaluate them and feel happy that you possess them. Acquisition gives a sensation of owning and possessing, and one feels secure when one owns and possesses objects of sensual pleasure, objects for providing the needs of the body, thoughts and ideas that gratify the emotions, that gratify the hunger of the brain for pieces of information. And when the storehouse of memory is stuffed with knowledge, assorted and selected, about science, about philosophy, about literature, about religious scriptures and so on, there is a sense of psychological security. And the moment one feels a sense of security, one settles down comfortably in that psychological security, conforms to the selected and accepted patterns of behavior. One becomes a prisoner of one's own knowledge. And the chains of knowledge that bind you are so comfortable that even the idea of breaking those chains in the name of freedom feels a rather painful process. Now, religion is not related in any way to any of the acquisitive activities on the psychophysical level. We have only 8 days for the communication and the communion. So we will be diving deep every morning, and it will be a hard work perhaps to keep pace with me. For some of you, the truth that one has understood. Obviously, truth cannot be propagated. It can be partially communicated through words, and it can be communed through life, shared partially through words, and shared much more intensely and richly on a non-verbal level through daily life. So the cerebral movement of acquiring words and ideas, accepting the authority of those words and ideas and conforming to them is of absolutely no value as far as a religious life is concerned. Tactfulness and skill in acquiring knowledge may lead to erudition and scholarship. It may lead to a vast knowledge of philosophies, theologies, and it may dispel the darkness of verbal ignorance to some extent. But it is not the content and essence of religion which is related to a personal discovery of the meaning of life, a personal discovery of the truth of life. Religion is related to an unconditional, total freedom that truth confers upon you. So it is related to learning rather than knowing. And unless one has watched and observed the difference between knowing and learning, it will not be possible for us to proceed further, even on the verbal level. I read a book on psychology, Eastern or Western, and I know about the human mind. That mind is an instrument, that the content of mind or consciousness is thought. Thought is of the past. I read that in books. Or I listen to talks, and I have gathered this knowledge about the mind. So I know about the mind, the human mind. And I may know about the mind, the conscious, the subconscious, the collective unconscious, and the ways of behavior, and so on. I may know about the word conditioning, and how the conditioned mind has no freedom. I may know about all this. I may know about Patanjali and the psychology of yoga, which is the basis of Oriental religions. But this knowledge may not help me to solve a single psychological problem in my life, because it is only information about the human mind. And the human mind for me then is an abstract entity. How will learning take place? The learning begins if I watch the movement of my own mind, which is an expression of the human mind. So from words and thoughts, from books and conferences, I'll have to come home to my own mind. Come back to the movement of my mind as it takes place from morning till night. And in all humility, watch it, observe it. So the relationship of the brain being with the abstract thought and ideas changes into the brain getting related to the movement, to its own movement in relationship. I hope you see the difference. in knowing that relationship is with words, with thought structures. You are with the abstract. The words may stimulate your emotions and feelings. The words may stimulate a kind of excitement, intellectual excitement. But when you come back home to your own life and begin to watch the movement of mind taking place in you, the relationship moves from the abstract to the concrete. From something in the pages of the books to something that is happening in life. So you are in intimate encounter with the movement of life that is taking place in you, within you. So learning requires a relationship with the movement of life and not the movement of thoughts and ideas. You may read books about swimming and see photographs and films, and you can give a beautiful discourse upon the science and art of swimming. But in order to learn, you have to take a plunge into the waters. So learning takes place only in the movement of life, away from the stream of relationships, away from the movement of life. Learning cannot take place. Secondly, the knowledge that one has acquired may lapse if there is a loss of memory. If the memory is not cultivated, you may read, you may know, at that moment you may feel you understand it and you may forget it. But once you learn, there is no forgetting. Because what one has learned becomes the substance of one's life. It becomes the substance of one's being, part and parcel. It is impossible to lose it. It can never be lost. And one doesn't have to make an effort to retain it, to preserve it. One has to make an effort to remember, to recollect what one has known, acquired at schools, at colleges, and so on. So knowing results in knowledge and enrichment of memory, whereas learning results in the growth of the person. The food that one eats gets assimilated by each and every part of the body. The bone structure, the glands, the muscles, the plasma, the nerves, the blood cells. So whatever food has been taken in gets converted into the substance of your life. I hope we understand the significance of the word substance. You are not apart from it. It is not separate from you. So religion is discovery of truth that takes place through learning. So learning results in understanding and growth. Knowledge being static, it has no dynamic force. to get implemented in your actual living. You may read books about ethics and morality, and read books about how bad it is to smoke and how bad it is to oversleep. You may know all those things. How harmful it is if one indulges in indolence and laziness and sluggishness, and the necessity of exercise for the body, and so on. You may know about it, but that knowledge does not release an inner urge and cannot oblige you to live accordingly. So you may read a book and say, yes, it's too harmful to oversleep, say for 10 hours a day, and at the same time you may continue to oversleep or overeat. But once you learn and you understand, understanding has an explosive capacity. It brings you to a choiceless awareness of the facts as they are. And so life changes. So learning, understanding, and growth, which is total change. When once you understand that a certain thing is going to cause a very serious illness that may be fatal within weeks or months, then your attitude to whole life changes. To food, to exercise, to your mixing with people, to your job, to money, to your body, because then you feel the breath of death on your shoulder. You realize that death is not an idea, it's a fact. And you feel the distance between that fact and yourself is going to be over quickly, and then you begin to change. Because there, learning results in understanding, and understanding leaves you in a choiceless awareness. Then you don't budge an inch from what you have understood. You don't argue, you don't plead. And there is no pampering of the body and the mind anymore. So you might have watched and noticed by now that for a religious living, learning is necessary. Now, how does learning take place? When a child learns, looks at you not only with the eyes, but looks at you with the whole body, with the whole being. I hope you have watched children as they grow and how they are anxious to learn. Give a toy that the child wants to understand and play with. If you watch a child, you will see that every nerve is tingling in that state of learning. It is an openness of the whole being. It's a receptivity without any inhibition, without any reservation. Because the child does not know, it can learn. Now, we are cluttered with knowledge. We know so much, and that very knowing becomes an obstruction in learning. Because the moment I feel I know, I can't even listen, I can't even look. While I am listening or looking, what I know comes in between. And even before I have listened to one sentence, the knowledge jumps in to evaluate, to compare, and to accept or reject. So a mind heavy with knowledge, stuffed with information, has no inner space left for pliability, has no receptivity. So what can one do? I cannot throw away the knowledge, the experience, the heritage that is imprinted on every blood cell. It cannot be thrown away. Please do see this. The knowledge, the experience, the culture, the content of civilization of which we are a product cannot be thrown away. It is there. And yet learning requires the emptiness which stimulates humility and receptivity. A cup that is full cannot be filled, obviously. That's why it is so difficult to be a religious person. It is easy to become a scholar, a philosopher, a learned person. It is extremely difficult to be a religious person because it's a tremendously simple thing. Freedom, unconditional freedom, is the essence of religion. And here we are bound, hands and feet, with the chains of knowledge, with the content of culture. The body is trained and conditioned to move in certain ways. The impulses, instincts are trained to move in certain grooves. The brain is trained and conditioned to function through certain channels with the help of certain symbols, and so on. I do hope that you have looked at least once at this whole panorama of bondages which get amalgamated together in what we call a personality. There is an order in it. There may not be chaos and anarchy. The conditionings may be in an orderly fashion. So I am asking myself, do you see, we are beginning at the very beginning, at the first step. How do I learn? So one thing is sure, that the body and the mind cannot be destroyed. They are the instruments for the learning to take place. They are conditioned. They are not empty. They are not blank slates on which you begin to write. So is there a way of emptying all these conditionings? Is it possible to be denuded of all these clothings, psychological, intellectual? If the emptying of all conditionings is not possible, then learning shall never take place. And understanding comes only through learning. And the choicelessness that liberates is the fragrance of understanding. This is a crucial problem. Now it's not a bucket or a bottle that you can hold in hands and then empty it. It is you, the ego, the self, the me. The body and the mind themselves are conditioned. And if we watch and observe the behavior of the body and the mind, even for 24 hours, we shall realize how there are so many patterns through which we move. Not a single reaction takes place but through a pattern. Not a single gesture takes place without a pattern. That's a part of heritage, or that has been intentionally, purposefully accepted by us. If one watches for a day, one shall see the nature of bondage in which we live. I said man is a prisoner of his own knowledge. It's a vast prison house, the global one. So let the conditionings be a fact for us and not an idea or a theory. Let us watch and observe how the mind and the body moves patternistically. Watch the moments when the anger erupts from within. Watch it half a dozen times and you will see a pattern in getting angry, in feeling jealousy, in the judgment of people, in the reaction to the present. Your past peeps through the words and gesticulations. And it's great fun watching it for oneself. So, before taking up the challenge of emptying the mind or the conditionings, please let us spend some time with ourselves and watch, observe the movement of the mind so that conditionings do not remain a word, an idea. Ideas do not liberate. Acquisition of ideas do not transform lives, but an encounter with the facts of life stimulate a movement within you. It's an encounter with a fact that leads to an understanding of the truth. So, desirous of living a religious life, I begin to watch. And to my great dismay, I discover that I cannot observe, I cannot watch. It's a pathetic condition. It's a pathetic condition of the human race that having grown lopsidedly, the brain has been sophisticated and refined and cultured and cultivated to such an extent that pure perception and bare cognition have become an impossibility for us. Whenever the mind moves in that complicated way of subjective reactions coming up, coloring the perception, judging it, the likes and dislikes polluting the perception, the norms and the standards contaminating the perception. So the perception doesn't take place. No perception takes place in a simple, elegant, innocent way. To watch, to observe is a non-reactional attentiveness. There is no reaction. The brain is alert, it is attentive, it watches. The involuntary activity of naming and identifying takes place, and yet there is no evaluatory action. A non-reactional attentiveness is the content of observation. So to my great dismay, I discover I cannot watch, I cannot observe. I begin to observe, and the state of observation lapses into the stage of experiencing. So I begin, and I say I have to educate myself, I have to learn to watch. Whether you watch a tree, whether you watch your own breathing process, whether you watch the movement of the clouds, or you watch the movement of thought, one has to learn by oneself to observe, to watch innocently, so that one looks, one listens, one knows what one is looking at. The color, the shape, the name of the object is registered through the involuntary activity of the brain, and yet the emotional, the evaluatory action does not take place. Observation disciplines the brain. It's a tremendous discipline. So I have to do it myself. No one else can teach me. Religion begins with learning observation. Now, while one is learning to observe, the past comes in, the values, the preferences, the prejudices they come in. Have you ever thought why they come in? Look, I have been born and brought up in a country which is predominantly Hindu. And the Hindus have accepted the authority of the Vedas, the Upanishads. Now, if I look upon myself as belonging to the Hindu community, if I have accepted the authority of Hindu religion or scriptures, please do see this. If I accept the authority of the scriptures and what they have got to say, the norms and criteria that the Vedas have given, deep down in the subconscious and the unconscious, there is this authority, this is acceptance of the authority of the Vedas or the Hindu approach to cosmogenesis or human life, all their judgments about human life. If the acceptance is there, now the acceptance becomes the driving force behind the conditioning. The past by itself has no power to move. It is the acceptance of the authority that provides the momentum to the conditionings. The conditionings are lying dormant within the whole structure that you call by the name XYZ. But acceptance provides the force. Can learning take place if there is an acceptance of authority? Be it the authority of the Vedas, the Bible, the Zenda Vesta, the Quran, the book of Daniel, Dhammapada, the teachings of Ramana, Ramakrishna, Krishnamurti. I am not a teacher or a master. That's why I don't include my name. But as the books have been published, you could as well include Vimala's name too. There is no exception. If I don't mention it, it's not to keep myself out of it. But I am not worthy of unlacing the boots of any one of those. So, if there is acceptance of authority, the past has the momentum. You are giving it a license. You are giving a license to the conditionings to come and intervene and interfere with the perception, with your actions, with your relationships, the moment you accept the authority. So look where we have come. We have come to the point that we would like to observe. The observation does not take place because the past interferes, and the past can interfere because we provide the force through the acceptance of their authority. It is easy to stand up in revolt and say, that's all trash. If you stand up and deny, the denial can become a new bondage like the acceptance. There can be a cult of denial and rejection and negation, as there is the cult of acceptance, conformity and imitation. And the world has seen both these, especially the 20th century. So I do not accept the authority, and I do not put in extra energy in the effort to deny, to negate, to reject. I say, I don't know. I say, I do not know whether there is God or there is not. I do not know how the creation took place. I do not know whether there is life after death or there was life previous to birth. I don't know. I wonder if I can bring across to you the significance of this attitude of non-acceptance and non-denial. Condemnation and denial create a rigidity within, as the acceptance and conformity do create. So one escapes from one approach and falls into the trap of the other. Now, as you might have watched attachment making you very rigid, creating expectations, creating obsessions, creating the desire to dominate, to depend upon. And if you move away from attachment and cultivate detachment, then also you become very rigid. You go on making efforts all the time to deny that attraction and infatuation which is moving within you. Unless there is a movement of attachment within, shall we ever require the attitude of detachment? Resistance to attachment is detachment. Resistance to acceptance is denial. So one would like to say that there is neither acceptance of authority nor denial of authority. One only says in all humility, I don't know. You and I cannot take away the historical facts of Vedas or Bible having been written. theologies having been written and been studied. So, one neither revolts against them, nor does one accept. One sees the actuality of not knowing. So one is in the state of not knowing. One sees that one does not know. One sees the visible. One has information about the visible. One can deal with the visible, but about the invisible, about the infinite, one does not know. It's a tremendous relief to admit to oneself that one is totally ignorant about the unknown. If one assumes as if one knows on the authority of borrowed words and thoughts and ideologies, then that assumption goes a very long way to create much misery and suffering. Because behind that borrowing there is no foundation. Borrowed knowledge, borrowed experiences grafted on one's psyche by imitation and conformity, they do not give you a foundation. They are not the roots out of which growth and blossoming and flowering can happen. There is no living self in that knowledge, in that borrowing, in that grafting. So one says, I don't know. I don't know what God is. I don't know what death is. So for learning, we came to observing. When we saw we could not observe, we came to the fact that observation was obstructed by the acceptance of authority. And as we are anxious to learn and find out what religious living is, we moved away from the duality of acceptance and rejection and saw the actuality of our living, that is a state of non-knowing. And we felt greatly relieved this morning that we do not know the unknown. What is the nature of that unknown, the infinity, if it is any, has it any content? The immeasurable, the unnameable, all these are words. And words shall not become truth unless they bring us to the facts of their being. So this morning we shall leave one another in the freedom of the state of non-knowing. Non-knowing has no reservations, no inhibitions, no rigidity. It sets you free. That's how a religion begins at the very first step, with freedom. That which does not begin in unconditional freedom can never culminate in total freedom. So from the acquisitive activity, we have moved to the act of learning. When we understood what is learning, it already relieved us, because there was no responsibility to remember, to cultivate memory, to make an effort. We understood that learning leads to understanding that becomes the substance of being. So I hope with every one of us sitting in this room, two facts could have taken place this morning. Movement away from the acquisitive realm, which has its own complications, movement away from that to the simple learning. This is one fact. From the complicated realm of knowledge to the realm of simplicity, that is learning. And the inquiry into learning, liberating us from the heavy burden of the authority of the past. The past is there, only the authority is not accepted. The past is there in the form of the body, the mind, the content of consciousness. It is there. What has disappeared is the authority.